charged independent
Where's the
on the
audio?
ballot, a record not
Oh
seen
god, yeah, there
since
is no audio.
2016. Well, do something. After all, this
Is
easily
Is
Go-
Tom doing the
described
party
as a
desk?
dramatic term.
Oh.
Mention the independent, Nathless, adding enough flair to outshine the last superstar independent, Nolix, by more than a mile. Nathless has managed to top several of the opinion polls and was the largest growing party despite not being one. In spite of this, Nathless can only win one seat, meaning the results will be interesting, to say the least, once his votes are taken out of the equation. I want to thank Channel 5 and Nova Productions for their excellent work in helping prepare election night. I'd also like to thank our developer, Sparky, for our brilliant new studio. And, as always, the support from our main panel and stage managers is crucial to our success. I'm so proud to be a part of the election night team, and I'm thankful for 5 now fun, excellent broadcasts. Now, though, this campaign will shape Britain after what was a difficult term for politics. Your vote will shape Britain for the coming months with Westbridge and all the other innovations lined up. Like every election, the results tonight will affect your careers and lives across Britain's public and private sectors. Let's get ready for the exit poll now and go live to Central London. Alright, guys, and now we have the exit poll. The Conservatives on 19 seats. The High Tories and Libertarians both on 9. UKIP on 5. The Liberal Democrats on 4. And Labour on 3. After what was a very difficult election, and a very interesting one to say the least, we have some semblance of what the results will be. Now, also, we are projecting that Nathless will win his seat, which is probably not a surprise to anyone. I want to go first now to Phantom for his comments on the exit poll, if he has any thoughts.
Thank you very much for that, Connor. Thank you for everyone for tuning back in. I think the exit poll is just about right. I think we're going to see quite a split across all the parties. Tories probably the biggest party with the most seats, around 19. The exit poll says. I think a little bit lower, about 17. High Tories 9. The exit poll saying I think about 11. Libertarians, I think it's about spot on, and everyone else, Liberal Democrats, Labour, and UKIP about spot on. Although I wouldn't be surprised if UKIP dipped a little bit more.
Intriguing. Torm, have your technical difficulties ended? Are you able to speak now?
I think it's fine. Hello.
All right, your mic's a little off quality, but that's fine. Give us your opinions on the exit poll.
A little crispy. The exit poll is unsurprising considering you have 2 parties in High Tories. Hold on, I'll be right back.
I think he's having some issues with his mic, but that's fine. Let's go to Sangoose to talk about the exit poll. Hello, welcome back, Mr. Independent.
Yes, well, despite the fact that I've run this poll, I'm not convinced, to be honest, because it's been wrong so many times in the past. So I'm not going to hedge my bets on anything yet.
Yeah, they've been wrong plenty of times. Though remember that first election, it was spot on, and
Oh
it was
yes, with
a terrible
YouGov.
precedent. Yeah, YouGov, rest in peace, YouGov. That was
Hopefully this time I
terrible.
can get it right, but we'll see.
Indeed. But yeah, so it projects a hung parliament, as you can see down on the screen. And for anyone new, 19 for the Tories, 9 for the High Tories, 3 for Labour, 9 for the Libertarians, 4 for the Liberal Democrats, 5 for UKIP, and 1 for NAFLIS. There's a lot to unpack here with the results, namely the fact that we're back to hung parliament territory. I think Fenton knows very well that he ushered in an age of majority and pretty much majority governments. I think Desmond was just short of majority, but it practically was a majority. We'll get into the exit polls voter percentages in a moment, but I just want to ask Fenton, and then we can maybe go to Torm if his technical difficulties have ended, what this is going to mean for building the next coalition. Obviously, we're going to dive into what coalitions will form later, but I do want to see if you have any thoughts on if this government is going to, if this parliament might last the full 2 months. Because we've had coalitions that last 2 months, but that was also in an age of coalitions where parties were prepped and primed for that. This isn't one of those ages. So, Fent, do you think this is going to last, this parliament will last 2 months?
It's a very interesting dynamic to definitely take. We've seen parliaments just about cut short. This is the first parliament we've seen that's actually lasted the full term. In terms of majority governments and hung parliaments and stuff, we've had hung parliaments for quite a while. It was my government that was the first that was a majority government. And I think from that and the troubles within Desmond's term really splintered the Imperials. And the Imperials obviously rebranded to High Tories. Some Imperials went off and made the Libertarians. Some Imperials went off and actually made UKIP. I mean, there's fragments of Imperials all over the place, which is why I'm not surprised to see it as a hung parliament. But I think in terms of coalitions, that'll work quite well because the two coalition sort of contenders really are High Tories and Libertarians, and of course they'll need a bit of support maybe from UKIP, which I think they'll seek out for. Being sort of imperial splinters, they've worked together before in a government, and I think they could come together and work together once again with a coalition. But the problem is with this parliament is we're seeing high sort of senior MPs, for example, like Theo Novak, who's just come down, and in terms of if Josh will stay within the leadership or maybe Theo will take over, and I think there's going to be a really difficult parliament for anything to get through. I mean, this is the first time in a while we might see, a three-party coalition, and usually they're a bit problematic.
Three-party coalition. I can't think of any three-party coalition that has worked, but that just might be my memory failing me, though we do have resident historian and noted old man Tormentium in the call, whose mic should be working now. Do you remember any three-party coalition that's worked before, Torm?
No, I don't think anyone that has sustained. There has been attempts in the past for at least back in like 2017, 2016, where parties attempt to bring in new coalition members if their government's unstable, but none of them have actually like succeeded in the long term. So what I'm seeing right now is it's going to be a hung parliament of the highest sort of disasters. High Tories and Libertarians are very similar in the way they operate their politics, but the fact that they're not a singular party infinitely makes the opposition far more difficult to work with. It makes any government far more adversarial than necessary, especially for people with such similar ideologies. It's just going to be a disaster if the exit poll does end the way it is right now.
Well, that is not a good sign, and I don't disagree completely. Though it's important to mention here that while we were talking about the seats will not reflect the popular vote at all this election, if I'm being quite honest. The Guardian has just put out the exit poll vote share, which puts NAFLIS at 40% of the vote. The Tories at 22%, the High Tories at 11%, Libertarians at 11%, and beyond there, it becomes very small percentages. Percentages that in normal elections wouldn't even garner a seat. We're going to talk a lot about NAFLIS, and we do have to get started somewhere. So, Christ alive, what happened with this election in NAFLIS? Let's go to Sangoose.
Oh, from what I can infer, I would suggest that a lot of it comes down to political apathy. A lot of people can't find their place in some of the main parties, and so they've chosen this knowable person to vote for, someone who's not representing any interest in particular, just himself on the show, and I think people can relate to that. That's probably why he's done so
Yeah.
well.
Truly, I think political apathy is really hitting the nail on the head. Though I never have seen political apathy that's been as intense as this.
It's
Though I think,
unprecedented, really.
yeah, it is unprecedented. Well, frankly, there was precedent for a massive independent taking over the show. But if you remember from my intro, Nathas has just eclipsed everything we thought Nolex was the only person that could ever do because of his special significance. And so now it's just like, God bless, politics is in a weird place.
It's even further strange when you consider how many actual parties are running, how many
Exactly.
choices there are for people.
Very true. And parties with, and this is something we will keep for later, but policies were really out there in this election. It wasn't like, voting for logos. Parties were different and disagreed on a lot of unique policies this election, which just makes the fact that Nathas as a speaker candidate that makes his success even more strange. Let's go to Torm now again, and then we'll go to Phantom. Just how did we get here? And I think for Torm, what does this mean for politics?
I fundamentally disagree with the point of political apathy, right? Because going off of this sort of exit poll, we see that there is actually a high interest in politics itself, right? Like there's so many diverse parties, many people are voting for different policies that these parties are proposing. But the fundamental issue is that the party leaders are the ones that are failing the electorate because they could not basically come together in themselves and push an agenda under one party that would actually succeed. This diversity among them shows that they can't actually reconcile their differences, despite the fact that they have very similar policies and ideas that they think will actually improve the country. So I don't think it's apathy at all. I think, in fact, we've never been more engaged with what's been going on in politics. It's really that politics needs to catch up with what the people want.
No, definitely. I mean, I can see that perspective, definitely. And I guess political apathy, in some ways, is a very simple answer to it. And I would still say that there is a degree of political apathy in what Nathas has done. Though I think you do mention some valid points about the parties. Phantom, do you have any comments? And then we'll go to the party desk with Torm.
I think what Tom said pretty much hit it on the head. The public's more informed now than ever before. I mean, the days, and we say this every election stream, but it's true, and we're seeing it come through more and more and more. The days are gone where you just DM someone or go down to Westbridge or London at that time and just get someone to join a party. The public are a lot more informed now. And I knew from my campaigning as well, you'd have a lot of members of the public asking you more and more questions, saying, why is your party better than the other? And asking questions that are specific to policy. And you can see that reflecting even more and more now when we're looking at the members count and parties really struggling to get members through. I think with an independent candidate, it shows exactly that, where people have started to lose their faith a little bit in parties and not really identifying much with parties and choose to identify a little bit more with an independent candidate, like Sangoose was said. I think there's good points on each side, but I think the main thing is the public are more informed now. And I really do think this sort of split across the board, 6 parties next election, when it comes to, I think we'll only have about 3 parties, to be honest.
No, yeah, we always have a big growth and then a massive shrink. You'll never know. Although we did see attempted mergers, the Libertarians did try to merge into the Labour, and that didn't work really well, though. In a moment, we're going to go to the party desk with Torm, where Chancellor Binny Boy 9 and then Shadow Chancellor 9 Kian will be speaking to Torm about the exit poll, and then we'll dip a little bit into their policy, but right now it's mostly going to be the exit poll. While we wait for us to be able to pan over there, and my team might be able to tell me when we pan over there, I'll take a look at the Twitter and see if we have any interesting comments yet. Oh, you're ready. They're ready there. Let me see if the camera has panned. Has it? I do not know yet. That's good. I'm not. The backstage is a little empty. One moment. Well, while we do that, we do have the Taoiseach of Ireland commenting that it's an interesting exit poll, that it'll be fun to watch. Steve Bruce, former candidate for president of the UK, is saying that Sean Ruark should be prime minister. Epic Noah, member of parliament for, let me get this right. Nope, I don't remember what constituency he's member of parliament for. He's saying it'll be interesting to remember. A parliament to remember, which I definitely think it will be. Drifter Frost is excited for the results, and he's reacting to Nova's tweet. And I just want to mention real quick how thankful I am to Nova and the whole team at election night for helping us. Once again, Tom Whitaker says that Bernie can still win. I don't know about that. And remember, if you wish to contribute to election night, you go on hashtag ElectionNightRX. You can find the hashtag and the UK announcements in every party's Discord announcements. Speak to them there and work with them. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I mean, it's going really well. Let's continue to look, though, at turnout. Let me see if I can get the numbers for total turnout yet. Total turnout crossed 400. Oh, we're ready to move to the interviews? Okay, then. We're ready to go to Torm with the interview. Have we panned over there yet? One moment. Torm, we're ready for you to start.
All right, well, I'd like to welcome Benny and Keenan here to the desk, and I'll begin with Benny as the incumbent chancellor. Looking at these exit poll, the Tories are actually losing quite a substantial amount of seats, but still enough to be in striking distance to form a government. How are you feeling about the overall results so far?
Personally, I have to say that I am quite happy seeing the earlier polls that we've seen from different news companies. 19 seats for an exit poll, I think, is quite a substantial amount. And if we're going to look at the actual poll, I think we will make more gains than that. Well, not gains, but we will have more seats than that. And I think at the moment, 19 is actually a decent amount of seats to be having with an exit poll at such weird times, if that makes sense.
No, I do understand that. And I guess this asks the question to your constituents and to Tory voters in general that this reduction in seats from the majority that you saw under Josh Miller and eventually with Josh Radcliffe has shrunk at least quite substantially. Do you think this is a referendum on the policies of the Tories, or do you think it's, how are you going to see this mandate if you do form a government?
Well, if there is a very big seat loss, as we've seen in this exit poll, I think that we will have to kind of put the foot forward and say that, yeah, we have missed out on a couple of policies here, but we are still the people that will take you far, in a sense. Just because we may have missed out on a couple of policies doesn't mean that we're not the right people for Britain, if that makes sense.
Right, and I see Kenyan's probably keen to respond to that as the shadow chancellor to the High Tories, the newest party in this election, which formed, I would say, relatively recently. How are you feeling about your result right now at 9 seats and how the electorate has responded to Conservative policies?
Well, I think the best way to kind of measure the success of the government is obviously, you look at Nathless, he's at 40% in the exit poll. I think that's shown a clear distrust, not just in the last government, but in the whole political process. There's quite clearly, people not satisfied. Obviously, as Fenton touched on earlier, there's been a lot of news coverage. Obviously we had the whole corruption scandal, which I think is really just put a whole distrust towards the kind of parties at the moment. And to be honest, I think it's affected every party, not just the Tories, it's also affected ourselves.
Well, how do you think your party moves forward from that then? Because you are, as you mentioned, included in this 40% that Nathis managed to gain approximately. We'll find out at the end of the night. But how do you think the parties have to respond to, I would say, such a robust response to their inadequacies?
Well, I think what parties need to really do is kind of, go back to what they're supposed to be doing, which is, obviously what I have been doing, for the past few terms, which is speaking to people, there's quite a clear, divide between, Parliament and the actual people, a lot of people, they see it in the news, but, they never, they don't know who to contact, who can get something done. A lot of them don't even know what, Parliament truly actually does. And I think we need to kind of sort out this divide. And I think a lot of the votes for NAFLA are kind of, saying, hey, we want kind of change, in the system because it's obviously not working.
I see. And what do you think about that, Vinny?
With the Nathless situation, I probably agree with Keen here because the Nathless is being seen as this resort, this last resort almost, that the parties are kind of failing. And I'd say as well that if the parliament that does come in after this election work more with the electorate, if they work more with the citizens of the United Kingdom, then they will start to trust the parties more.
Right. And I guess that does lead me to the second question of how do you think you're going to restore faith in your party and your electorate with the certain policies that you've chosen? Like what do you think is sort of a hallmark policy? I know you're both the chancellor, so I guess you can talk about the treasury that will really ignite sort of a faith and belief that you are doing the correct thing for the country.
I think as chancellor, the policy of maybe an audit to show that we are actually looking to reform the business sector. We are looking to pick out them inactive businesses. Those inaccuracies kind of shows to the whole country that we do care and we are ready to go that extra step to just observe and then make changes from there instead of just going in full on without any real knowledge of what to do.
Right. And then, Keenan, would you respond to that question?
Well, obviously, I've already touched on, I think there's a discontent, and obviously one of our key policies was obviously to kind of get, all the media companies in a group, get all the transport companies in a group, get all, clothing, whatever, different companies, have them all in a group and have them actually have a look at bills, have a look at them actually, debate policy, speak about it, speak between them as well, and just, get a really good dialogue going, between people when we're making these important decisions that affect them. They need to have a say now, I believe, whether that be through referendums or even groups, in the treasury. I just think we need to have constant communication.
No, right, that makes sense. And do you think so far through this campaign you've actually done that? Do you think you've begun the change you want to see?
Well, I've obviously been speaking to, business owners who've been saying, hey, this term, we've been all right, we've got through everything, but, we haven't really been spoke to, we've been spoke to now and again, I just think people kind of feel like left out of decision making, people aren't really as involved as I think they'd want to be involved in, like, people don't get a say over stuff. It's just a bit sad. So I think, yeah, we just need to kind of work towards kind of doing what people do in campaigning, maybe DMing, obviously DM campaigning is controversial, but need to be DMing people, not just during the campaign, speaking of people, getting their ideas and, debating them with them, seeing their suggestions and just continuing on like that.
I would have to agree that political participation at the highest levels of the electorate is always necessary to succeed with your policies. And I'll end with Vinny's response to that question I gave Keegan.
So personally, I think that the issue this term was that the electorate were tired and so were the parties, and the electorate didn't actually want to hear what the parties wanted to say because I think it's because of that distrust they felt with Parliament and with the government to an extent. So I think it's basically as a Parliament building up that trust again through conversation with the electorate and through good performance as a government. And once we get through that barrier of trust, we'll be able to confer with the electorate more and they'll be able to trust us more. And I think the campaign atmosphere will itself kind of I can't think of the word for it, but yeah.
Well, all right. I like both your optimism and belief that there is a way to go forward and rebuild the trust with the electorate. I think that'll be a very important policy going forward. And we'll go back to Connor.
Thank you for that. Interesting discussion there. It's going to be an interesting parliament, though, and I think Cian did very accurately address the lack of connection between parliament and the people, and that stuck with me in my own mind. I want to go to Phantom real quick to get his opinions just on what he heard, and then also I want to dive in a little bit to the Lit Dems, because we're going to talk about the Lit Dems a little in depth and how interesting they have been with this campaign in just a moment after Phantom.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've heard a range of interesting stuff. I think it's a little bit concerning actually to hear from Nine Cian, quite a prominent member as well, and the father of Parliament at the moment, sort of admit that people have lost trust in politics, and after the whole court case and stuff like that, it's really taken effect not just on the Tory party, but as he described, on all parties across the board, which again I think is quite concerning, to be honest. I mean, but what it does show is that there is some connect between reality and politicians, because they're aware of this, and they're aware of the or beginning to become aware of the effects that it's having, and the effects that all this distrust on politics and the cases and the opposition strikes and whatever is starting to have on politics as a whole. And I think this will be quite a key waking point for people like Cian to really, really step up to the plate and really think and reevaluate the entire situation. I just wanted to use this opportunity quickly to just mention the Lit Dems gaining from Labour Islington. So Islington was the party's chief whip seat, and quite a stronghold for Labour. And Labour had 7 seats.
It was my seat when I was Labour leader, if that says anything.
Yeah. It was quite a strong Labour seat, and obviously Labour having 7 seats last term and being predicted quite low in the sort of poll, I think they're probably going towards that course if Lit Dems are making substantial gains like Islington, maybe even less.
Indeed, and that's a very valid point. Did you have anything you wanted to say on the literal Democrats, or should I take it from there? Because we have a little bit of a segment we're going to talk about the interesting element of that campaign.
I think we'll leave it to the segment, because I think the segment describes it quite nicely.
All right, so the literal Democrats, as we recall, was an interesting party that Steve R. Bruce founded. So let's go to this video.
Settle down, Radcliffe. We are just a lit dumb, quite literally. Wanna get a bit of dumb? Yeah. Jake gonna be Prime Minister. Prime Minister? Yeah. Josh's corruption very sinister. He dropped the soap.
So, as we can see, there was an interesting campaign approach by the literal Democrats, and I think that really reflects one of the interesting parts of this election, is that we had a whole basket of cats with a varying amount of, how should you say, intent. At times, they demanded that we end all violence in Ireland, and at other times, they suggested we invade Ireland. They had interesting debate performances, and despite that, through it all, they did actually have serious policies. If I pull up their manifesto, as you could call it, your mini manifesto, they wanted to increase employment, public service autonomy, and violence in Ireland, as I said. Interestingly, expanding the Ministry of Justice's remit to include in-game warrants and sentences, a very unique policy, and then continuing Job Center. And so they managed a very interesting duality. And I think Steve Bruce, actually, when I was speaking to him about registering the party, he said that the party had a bit of a meme intent of campaigning, but it had actual policy. And I think that's new for Britain. we normally don't tolerate something like that. But I think the Liberal Democrats have, I mean, obviously from the exit poll, I think they have 5 seats in the exit poll or 4 seats. They've done something effective, something, on brand. Let's go now to Sangus, and I want to get his opinions on this. And after that, we will go to Torm, who has Andre Hodge and Mark J. Wentworth from UKIP. We'll discuss the Lit Dems, and then we'll discuss some other things. But Sangus, I just want your opinions on the Lit Dems.
Well, I think they really took off under Steve, and they projected for a while to do really well with him actually as leader. They've run an interesting campaign, and I think they'll be rewarded for that in part.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you have to wonder, they were actually doing very well originally with the, how would you say, when Steve was leader, they were projected to really do well.
Yeah,
And
they were in
of
the
course,
lead for
they were in the lead for a
second.
while, yeah. And now they're not, evidently. Though, of course, that was in the middle of the Josh Miller scandal, which we're going to avoid on this. We're going to avoid on that. But yeah, it's a really interesting.
It's a niche, I think.
Yeah,
and it's something people need.
Yep. And I mean, in the style of Nathless and how he's perhaps, and I saw this interesting comment from Timothy Cathcart for saying, "Don't credit Nathless for doing the impossible. Anyone could have registered as an independent and got that many votes." Yes, it's very true. I don't know if Nathless is probably a particular character since he had the speaker brand behind him, but I don't think these people have done the incredible, but they've definitely done unique things this election to try and stand out after a lot of mundane governments.
It definitely has to be the right person, not just
You have
anyone.
to be the right person.
Do what
Yep.
Nathless has done.
And then just a quick sidebar before we go to Torm at the party desk, and I'll give the staff time this time to prepare to pan over to Torm at the party desk. Tom J. Whitaker again has informed us that this is a fake and fraudulent election, and that Bernie Sanders actually won. Just so we all know, like putting that out there. So now he can stop spamming my notifications. Are we ready then to pan over to Torm again? And I know we just went with Torm, but I think I want to hear what the Liberal Democrats have to say about their campaign. All right, we'll pan over there. Now, let's get the cameras there. Hi, Torm. Take it away.
All right, welcome back. We do have Andre here, and we have Mr. Mark J. Wentworth. I do not know where one of them went, but we do have somebody here. I'll begin with Andre. Tell me a little bit about what you think went right for the Lit Dems. I suppose you do have a few seats going, and you do seem to have made a splash in your first election.
Well, I just want to say that I've seen that we have a confirmed seat. I just want to thank my mum. Want to thank my dad. I want to thank Steve for founding the party. I want to thank Azzy for her. Azzy. Let me just look. Azzy, Cammy, Tim, Jake, and Sam. Obviously, we got a predicted seat, and I think that a lot of people have been calling us a meme party. Listen, we aren't a meme party, right? We are here for the long run. Okay, Lit Dem surge. All right. I think that what you're gonna see is at least 40 seats ish. Yeah, obviously that's a little bit on the generous side for the other parties, but no, I do think that we have had a very good campaign. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Before I burst your bubble, Andre, we'll begin with Mark on a response. What do you think? What do you think went right for UKIP in your first election?
I think as our first election, what we are predicted is actually quite well. There's been a lot of mishaps, but I couldn't have wished for better.
Is that all? Well, I appreciate your optimism, and I guess I'm going to go back to Andre here after that long soliloquy telling me about your hopes and dreams for UKIP and perhaps not full truths about how many seats you actually got this election, but I do find it intriguing, the style of campaign you did run with more of a laid back and humorous approach, which seems to have garnered you a little bit of support. Like, do you think this is an important strategy going forward that other
Yeah.
parties aren't tapping into?
I mean, look, obviously the music video has had a lot of controversy around it. And you know, I think everyone whose opinion that I actually value said that they loved it. To the rest, I say this is why I have no friends outside of Roblox. But don't worry, okay? There is still hope, because voting Lit Dems is the first step towards losing your virginity. All right, there is light at the end of the tunnel, Sid. I don't agree with Sierra on a lot of things, but credit where credit's due. He has a sense of humor, and all of you should follow his example. Apart from hating the poor people and stuff like that, but other than that, right, he's an absolutely solid guy. Yeah.
Well,
So I think the
Andre-
meme campaign has gone well.
Well, Andre, I'm glad your mom and your only friend did appreciate the work that you've put in,
Exactly.
given
they voted
that
for
you
us.
will have no one else in your party after that. So,
Right.
Mark, what do you think UKIP went right? Like, tell me about a little bit your policy and your campaign style.
Well, we're in regards to campaigning, I think the 60 members that we gained within the week was very good. It was a slower decline than a slower increase than I expected, but it was rather well. We decided to go for a more personal approach while campaigning with people. We spoke to them, we got to know their interests and what issues they valued, and we reflected that within our policies. People were complaining a lot about Northern Ireland and the police brutality. So we decided that we were going to encourage the Northern Irish executive that's yet to be elected and the Irish Free State government to form policing standards committees to make sure that this corruption and brutality does not continue.
So, do you think taking on such a policy in Northern Ireland has actually gained you support within the electorate, or has it not had much of an impact?
I think it certainly has. It swayed a lot of people that I talked to personally, and a lot of Northern Irish citizens seem to like the idea.
That's good. And before we go back to the desk, I'd like to hear a little bit about UKIP in and of itself. Tell us a little bit about the leadership style, the direction you want to take in Parliament, and I mean, kind of show yourself off on your first election night.
Well, I'm not the leader, but Aldrich has taken also a very hands-on leadership style. He's been always in talks with all the members and everybody, reflecting their opinions. And in regards to Parliament, well, we haven't got that much seats. We plan to be opposition, and we think that keeping the government to account on issues like Ireland that they seem to ignore continuously is very important.
Oh, well, I do thank you both for coming, and that's a very insightful answer into the way UKIP operates. We'll go back to Connor at the main desk.
Lit Dems
Thank
forward.
you. I swear to God. Thank you for that, Torm. I apologize for the Literal Democrats. I had faith that this representative would not do that, but I suppose my faith has been shattered. Regardless, though, I can say that without concern because voting has closed. We do have a result. It's out there. We haven't figured it out yet, but there is a result out there. Let's go now to the main desk, and we can start discussing some of these policies. Like, as I said, the Lit Dems actually did have some interesting policies, despite the fact that, of course, their campaign took a different approach, which, according to the exit poll, worked. So it's not my place to comment. Let's start with a very interesting and easy one that the literal Democrats actually had a very interesting policy on. The Ministry of Justice. They suggested in-game warrants and sentences. The Libertarians also proffered an interesting policy with giving more autonomy and a stronger role for the Lord Chancellor. I assume that would continue in the hands of combatant, the permanent secretary, but perhaps they could split those roles again. Let's go to Fent. In your term, you had to oversee the Ministry of Justice, and you know it very well because of some problems that might have occurred over the course of your term. Everyone has many problems with the Ministry of Justice. What do you think is the best path forward for that ministry? And how can the government be a part of that?
Oh Christ! Well, where do we even begin with this one? I mean, the Ministry of Justice has got so many issues, but the problem is these issues are inherent, and some of these issues a government cannot fix. And I said this on my little debate as well. I said each party always makes a promise every term, and they've done it since my term, including me. I did it as well. That we're going to fix the Ministry of Justice, we're going to revitalise it, and whatever. And I wasn't able to do that personally, and the parties that have came after haven't been able to do that, and yet they're still promising the same thing over and over and over. And I think that really does contribute to people losing faith in parties as well, because every party has promised they're going to do something wild with the Ministry of Justice, and nothing happens or nothing comes out of it. The problem is with in-game stuff is it requires developer sort of relation, and I think one thing that Parliament is really lacking at the moment is connect between Parliament and developers. And I think the last government struggled with that as well, and the government before struggled with it as well. In terms of in-game stuff and that policy, I think it's a risky policy to make because, again, it depends on developers. And I actually think that in-game sentences aren't the way forward with this. I don't think it's going to work. I think the problems with the Ministry of Justice is stuff like the Crown Office, and it's stuff that needs changing and chopping. And I think taking the approach of giving the permanent secretary more power rather than bringing back a Lord Chancellor is actually the way to go with this one. I think the permanent secretary doesn't really hold much power right now, but they know the system quite well. And of course, we do essentially need a Lord Chancellor. And I think splitting over them roles back to the permanent secretary is the way to go with this. And I think although it won't make a massive difference, it'll make some difference. I think the Ministry of Justice really does need something drastic, and it not only that, the problem is it needs more experience and it needs figures that were previously very, very involved with it to come back and sort of support it and revitalise it and revitalise the juniors. At the moment, Barry is going through a scheme of his in, and I think he's going to propose it as actual legislation next Parliament, which is a fantastic scheme. But to benefit from that scheme, it takes a while and it's going to take months. And I think there's no easy fix to this.
Nope. Very true. There is no easy fix. And I know for a fact the Ministry of Justice was a massive issue when I was a leader and when I was Labour Party leader. And it definitely had an influence on how strong my government was in re-election. It's an important part of the campaign. Got to be honest, it's an important part of politics only because it's one of the only departments the government has, well, unless the Libertarians get their way, the government has near full authority over right now. Bar maybe foreign affairs to an extent, though there's not much there. Let's go now to Torm, who is a resident legal expert, lawyer probably, or at least, like Josh Miller, a lawyer. Torm, do you have any comments on what the path forward for the Ministry of Justice has to be?
No, my only comment really is that my lawyer will be in contact for such slanderous accusations of me being similar to Josh Miller in my law and legal experience. No, I think it's really the issue with the Ministry of Justice lies in the fact that it's a little convoluted at times, that at the best of times that new governments come in, they have someone with a little bit of experience, someone like Barry, for example, Barry Rookar, who very involved in the Ministry of Justice, but they don't adequately have a hold over the entire ministry to make effective changes. They don't have enough experience, they don't have enough knowledge, they don't have enough time to push through adequate reforms that actually encompass everything the Ministry of Justice needs to do. So going forward, governments need to find a way to streamline their reforms and really work with the senior and permanent leaders on a continued basis rather than one-offs in order to make effective change, because as we see with the turnover in Prime Minister and Justice Ministers, it's not conducive to long-term change.
No, yeah, definitely. There's not a lot in the Ministry of Justice that's conducive to long-term change right now. Sangus, you're the last one for this topic. If you have any comments, anything to add on the Ministry of Justice?
Personally, I think it needs to refocus its attention away from prosecutions of in-game, directly outside of game, issuing week-long sentences for participating in what is a game set up by this group. It's the wrong place to be focusing on, and if that can be,
I agree.
If that could be refocused into in-game contribution, that would be wonderful, really. That's where it needs to be, and that's where we have to take it.
And I think I've said this a few times, and I think many people believe that it's difficult for the parties to propose that, but really in-game crime shouldn't be prosecuted as intensely maybe as it is. Maybe there should be an in-game process. I don't know how to do it, but I think you have a special perspective as a former Home Secretary and then someone currently in the, well, formerly GMP and now Met. I just think that's an interesting idea. And what the Ministry of Justice would do after that perhaps is a difficult question to answer, but it's also not an impossible question, and it might be an interesting question to ponder.
Yeah, so we're asking it to serve two purposes, really, because we still need it for high-profile cases like Josh Milner and all that.
Sure, yeah.
But then we need some interaction game like we're talking about here.
Indeed, yeah, we need, and I think there are a lot of other areas where the Ministry of Justice could be expanded if it proves to be a little more trustworthy. And I don't know all those areas, but I think there are sectors where a court could be useful, and we could streamline processes of other courts. I think perhaps the Ministry of Justice could possibly get involved with like Business Complaints Commission. That's a very rough idea, and it might not work. But I think ideas like that, where you give the Ministry of Justice more purpose, so there's then more purpose for legal aid, prosecution services, all of that. Right now, the caseload is both not satisfactory, I would say, and then at the same time, we don't want more cases because that would hurt in-game events. So you want to find a new place to get crime, or get cases rather. I'm going to go now to the Twitter, and we see Brandon Halliday, the leader of The Guardian and member of Parliament for, I do not remember, I should get the Parliament spreadsheet up because I'm going to keep doing that and forgetting it. But he says that it's unlikely that the opposition could create a coalition that lasts between the 5 different parties. The question then, which we should address, is there going to be a coalition that doesn't have the Tories in it? Because the exit poll, if I recall correctly, would make it very difficult for enough parties to form a I mean, it wouldn't make it impossible, but it wouldn't be easy for the opposition parties to all gather together against the Tories if the exit poll is true. And we know the exit poll could be wrong. It's been wrong before. Just looking at it, the high Tories and Libertarians would have to be together just to get 18, which would be one less than the Tories. I mean, maybe they have a little easier time because the Tories have made a lot more enemies than friends in this election. I don't totally know, though. I mean, honestly, everything comes down to the wire, and we've seen coalitions form that we would never have expected. Tom Harkin, the acting leader of the Labour Party and the official deputy leader, who's running in Nottingham, has not won their seat yet, is mentioning that devolution needs to be mentioned more. The Labour Party spoke about devolution quite a lot, actually, in their manifesto, that they want to expand to Wales, which Sangus, we'll talk to you about that, and Scotland. I think that's an interesting perspective from Labour, and just in general, it's good that Labour are proposing interesting policies. I don't necessarily know whether or not I would support it. I don't know if it's in my place to say whether or not I'd support it. But I want to get Sangus's just comments in general about what he thinks about the idea of expanding and continuing with Labour's plan for devolution.
I think we should go carefully about that. Whilst it may be the dream, it's something that has to be attainable and has to benefit the country as a whole. We can't be splitting activity when we don't have enough of it, basically. We do have a lot. It needs to be directed properly.
Fair point. I know with Ireland, activity in Ireland is always fragile in general. Well, Northern Ireland rather now. The Free State is different and independent, and it's a different body. But Northern Ireland, and then when we had the Lord Lieutenant of all of Ireland, the activity there is fragile, and so we've had trouble when we try and expand to other devolved nations. But you'll never know. Monkey says that devolving Wales is more than a dream, Sangus. I cannot say the rest of that. Ben Hathaway says...
I can appreciate his optimism.
Yes. Ben Hathaway says that the Ministry of Justice is better than any other department. And, okay, Shalik, who prosecuted Josh Miller, says that I wish people would understand the Ministry of Justice is not broken. It simply needs people. That's it. The in will not fix that. A lot of promises will not fix it. Obviously, we're not going to go back to the Ministry of Justice comment, though it's important to get an Esquire's comment, an opinion on that, reaction from the public. And if you do give reaction, as some people have found out, Election Night RX is trending for some horribly awesome reason. Feel free to give us your opinions. We want to hear the public's opinions. That's what the whole point of the election is. We're also getting notes that people are congratulating the Conservative Party for their victory. Nathless, as apparently is pronounced, is happy to be elected for his 9th consecutive term. Epic Noah, whose constituency I forgot, reminded me that he's Member of Parliament for Brighton. We just discussed the Ministry of Justice, and then we touched on devolution. I guess now would be a good time to turn to the Home Office with NAS autonomy, National Ambulance Service autonomy. The Conservatives and UKIP have expressed very clear support for continuing that autonomy. Now, we also know that there was a lot of conversation about rescinding that autonomy earlier in the term, and then in the last week of 2 terms ago. Should NAS be autonomous? Should the GMFRS, all of that, should they have the autonomy that the Tories and UKIP are standing behind? Do they need it? Is autonomy good for politics? All of those questions, and of course, with the difficulties in the leadership of the National Ambulance Service, is this not the time for autonomy? Maybe. I'll go to Phantom.
Hello, right. I'm sure the streamers on or whoever's watching the stream at the moment will kick themselves if they're in last basically when I'm about to say this, but the regulation act was actually made by me, which allows government to have direct control into the ambulance services, and I still stick by it. I really, really do. I think LAS has the potential to be good, but it sees little things and this massive game of politics that seems to run in their leadership, and it really lets them down every single time. This time as well, with Sarah being replaced, the rumours suggest, and not even rumours, some of the rumours are actually fact, that again it was a game of politics, and this politics that's resolving around Gold Command and Silver Command lets it down every single time. And that's one thing that the fire service does well, actually. They don't have much politics within their ranks. They actually work nicely together. I mean, you'd think logically that, and without offending anyone or whatever, that the fire service would have a lot of problems. But the fire service is actually quite stable, and it has been for a while. Even when they were having development issues and the fire system was broke, like completely at Eastbrook, they still stuck together and they still worked well, and they had a really good sort of structure. And LAS has just struggled and struggled and struggled, and it's chugged and chugged and chugged along. I don't think autonomy is the right thing to do at all. I think giving more autonomy to Home Office departments and stuff takes away government role, and at the end of the day, it's about a balance. It's about striking a balance between government involvement and sort of command involvement, and how much command actually have.
Indeed. And yeah, I agree that to an extent we shouldn't be giving all the government's power away, and there should still be residual, at least, influence from the government over these services, just so the government has something to do. Let's look now at the current seat count. The Conservatives have 5, the High Tories have 2, Labour has 1, the Libertarians have 1, the Liberal Democrats have 1, UKIP has 1, and the Independent has 1. Everyone has a seat, which means it will be a 7-group parliament, 6-party, 1 independent. That's the most divided parliament we've had in a very long time. And the opposition is also very divided, and everyone's at the same pace right now. There is one across the opposition. 4 parties have 1, and then only 1 has 2, compared to the Tories, which have 5. Comparatively, the opposition only has 2 more seats than the Tories, despite the fact that there are 5 more parties. It's a lot. it's a lot to look at this and say, well, after everything that happened with that last dramatic term, the Tories might be on track for another victory. You don't really know. Of course, the polls might be a little off, and then, we might be getting Tory safe seats early now, but if the Tories form government again, what do we think that's going to mean for their, or rather, if the Tories come first, what do we think that's going to mean for them forming government? What is Josh Radcliffe's path back to number 10? Because it doesn't look like he's getting anywhere with the high Tories. Maybe with the Libertarians, the literal Democrats. Is he going to gamble with that? UKIP agreed with them on a lot of things, but UKIP was also formed from high Tory splinters. And then Labour itself is just, will they even enter a coalition after, evidently they're set to lose 4 of their seats now? Will they, they stayed out of government last term because they felt they had a bad result. This is losing, over half their seats now. I want to go to Torm. Who are the Conservatives' obvious partners for government? And how can Josh Radcliffe form government?
Well, just looking at obviously numbers, you look at immediately high Tories and Libertarians. Now, I don't actually know anything insider, and this is just me speculating on previous interactions and things I've seen, but I don't think Josh is going to be able to make a coalition with the high Tories. The high Tories have really been at his throat, I would say, the entire term at this point. Like, between Slip, Kean, and the other people they have in the party, I think they're quite upset with the way the Tories have conducted themselves, the policies that they've undertaken, the people they've hired, the job they've done. So I don't see them being anywhere near what the Conservative policy and government will do. However, the Libertarians with a new leader under Henry Cathcart, I think, are the most amicable partner that Josh can possibly find to get back in power, because I would say Henry is pragmatic. He wants to improve, especially the Foreign Office. He's very into that. He wants new policies. He wants to improve the country. And I think he's more willing to set aside differences that he's had with Josh and the Tories in the past in order to join them in government and really leave his mark on something. And again, just because Edward, the previous leader, is out, it really leaves the door open for kind of a new cabinet and a new path for the party.
Very fair points. Sane, do you have any comments? Sangus?
Oh, sorry. What are we talking about?
We're discussing what Josh's path to government is, if he
Oh,
can
right.
get any. And then if not Josh,
Basically,
who
he is down the river without a paddle. Unless he can scrape together a majority, Labour's really his only option, from what I can see. It's still difficult for the others to be able to form, because with that exit poll, it looks like it's a 4-way coalition, which isn't particularly promising, is it?
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. It really doesn't. I don't know what's going to work out.
We could be heading for another election.
Well, I'll make sure to get the election night team ready. You'll be seeing the same graphics, I guess, guys.
Yeah.
Fent, do you have any comments?
Just quickly, I just wanted to add that although Labour didn't go into coalition last term, they also said last term that they weren't going to back the King's Speech, and they were consistent.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I just got a special update, a fancy update from the Conservative Party office that Prime Minister Josh Radcliffe rules out any coalition with the High Tory Party. They are not fit to govern under any circumstances.
Oh, it's not like they were going to do it anyway, was it?
But I think it says that, it's an important thing to kind of have in the mind that they're going to be drawing lines in the sand with ideological partners. And if they have had feuds with people, they're not going to want to work with them.
Yeah.
This might mean that they're going to be closing out some needed coalition partners.
Yes, which leads me on to my point. Although Labour last term said that they weren't going to coalition and they were going to, fail the King's Speech is what they were saying. They were consistent all the way through. And last minute, what did Labour do? They went and voted for the King's Speech. And Kelvin was consistent all the way through last term. He was absolutely adamant that the King's Speech was going to fail and he was going to fail it. And last minute he switched. And when they were asked why they switched last minute, he said, because I think it's better if there's a Tory government than to go back into an election. And we might see a repeat of that again. And I think if Josh Radcliffe has a little bit about him, he might just reach out to Labour. The problem is, are Labour going to be enough to get him over the mark? It's exactly how Sangoose described it. He's going down the river without a paddle. And I think by him ruling out coalitions right now, and like you said, ideological partners, he's going down a very, very dangerous road, because high Tories and Liberals are quite similar. And, they think the same way, as we've talked about before. And it's the same with UKIP. So that's already 3 partners wiped out. And Liberal Democrats have already said that, their whole campaign was based to go against the Tories. So then you've got Liberal Democrats out as well. Again, I think he's going down a very dangerous road, and I think the Tories need to be a little bit more open to coalition partners and building trust between other parties and compromising if they want to, hold on to government. Or otherwise, I think this is going to slip out of their hands very quickly, very easily.
Yeah, God, it'll be an interesting formation of government. Because we're going to have to deal with the fact that there is not going to be an easy partnership anywhere. So we might be doing these coalition negotiations for a long time. But of course, the exit poll might be wrong. We are getting a lot of comments, though, that, on the hashtag, that there are people just saying that they think it's going to be another election soon. People are not confident in this election. And that's, if what Keane was saying about he doesn't really trust, or he doesn't think people trust and understand politics, maybe if they're seeing a massively divided parliament, they won't trust it anymore. But yeah, let's continue and discuss again. I think we did touch on, what the high Tories could do if they were trying to form a government, or the Libertarians, because the exit poll, I think the exit poll shows them as tying, or it shows them as tying, which is just interesting in general. Yeah, it shows them as tying. We discussed NOS autonomy, and there was a comment here. Let me try and dig it out. The leader of UKIP said he doesn't think it's the government's right to intervene, and that they should not be stamping their foot down and causing further crisis with the London Ambulance Service. Mark Wentworth, another UKIP representative, said it is based and capable of running itself. Monkey says the Regulation Act for LAS needs to stay in place. LAS may be on the path towards prosperity, but the bill needs to stay there as, like Fenton said, there are still internal issues that keep it back. Margaret Monty said that autonomy is more likely now with this new experienced leadership. Margaret Monty, as we know, is a former Home Secretary under Sangoose. George Bezina says that he couldn't agree more with Fenton, that LAS needs oversight, but for the benefit of the service itself, not to suit a political agenda. We should continue now on to, we'll get some more seats now as the counting is continuing, but I want to go quickly and address just a little bit about, how would you say, the Space Force. Labour are suggesting nationalizing it. So, should the Space Force be nationalized? Should the Lords have originally failed the bill that would have established the Space Force? I'll go now to Sangoose. If he's there this time. Okay, we'll go to Torm instead.
Well, I don't have much of an opinion on the Space Force. However, I do have an opinion on nationalization. I do think that expanding the government in some ways could be beneficial, because we've seen, I'd say, over the past year and a half or two, that the government has kind of ran out of things to do. Like, they twiddle their thumbs in the Ministry of Justice, and they pray that something happens in the Foreign Office every single term, and it's usually 50-50 if something actually happens, positive or negative. We've seen things go poorly for Josh Miller in justice reform. For him, we saw things not go really well for Theo there as well. So I just really think that the government could nationalize the Space Force. Why not? I don't see what sort of issue there is with that beyond some people role-playing that the government is socialist and intervening in private business, which is another debate. But I think the essence of expanding the government, finding new things to do that isn't just policing, justice, or things like that is a very good thing.
Fair point. And we are preparing now the party desk. We're going to get a Labour and Libertarian representative up in a moment to comment on all of that. Though Aldrich Redwood, again, has made another comment that expanding the government, expanding it with nationalizing the Space Force, would crush the rights of individual citizens. Fenton, do the rights of individual citizens actually... Is there a concern about encroaching citizens' rights on Roblox? There might be. I'm not trying to say there isn't, but is there? Because we've seen pretty clearly that UKIP has addressed on multiple times business owners' rights. They've addressed on other times the subjects around, individual liberty, say with nationalization. Should we be worried about the size of government? Is that a factor here, Fenton?
Well, what I would say immediately is you look at how split we are at the moment, and you look at the cabinets. I mean, traditionally, each cabinet, let's be honest, has got one sort of or two weak ministers. But you look at cabinets now, and just to be quite frankly honest, there's inexperience all over the place. And I think expanding government, making it a lot bigger, is going to really sort of feed on that gap that we already have existing and make even less experience. I've never agreed with a big government. I've always agreed with keeping government tight, and I've always agreed with keeping government small but concise, is the way I like to see it. I think the secretaries of states can do a lot, and I think, especially with the way that politics is at the moment and how much sort of influence a government actually has, large governments just aren't worth it, really, and I don't think they do much in terms of effect. Governments have really turned to more of a legislative role. Before, it was about legislation, enacting policy, working with department leaders, etc., etc., etc. But in recent times, especially with the fall of the Foreign Office, we've seen more focus towards legislation rather than actual policy. And I think with that, again, only really applies to Secretary of States instead of all these little junior positions. So I think we should keep government small.
Fair point. Fair opinion you have there. I believe now we're ready to go to the party panel where we have Nero Blakeston and Tom Harkin. Tom Harkin's the deputy leader of Labour, and Nero Blakeston is the chancellor candidate for the Libertarians. Let's pan there now. Cameraman and Torm, take it away.
Well, I welcome you both to the panel, and I'm very fascinated to talk with you, Thomas, given you're our first Labour guest. And I don't think people have heard much about Labour. Labour has flown, I would say, relatively under the radar, especially under Kelvin this campaign, who usually showed up and showed out in elections previously. How do you feel like your party has done?
Well, given the circumstances, this election, with Kelvin being on holiday and the election actually taking place during the holiday, I believe that the Labour Party did what it could to get its message out, and I want to thank the team of individuals, specifically Doug as well, for contributing massively to trying to get the Labour vote out.
Right, and do you think, we have heard, I would say, murmurs of leadership change and perhaps the party merging under Kelvin. How do you think, given this result, that Labour moves forward?
Well, I think that obviously, as you can tell right now, there won't be a leadership change unless Kelvin initiates one. No one in the party supports one at this time. Kelvin has done an amazing job of leading the Labour Party. But I also think that the Labour Party is going to have to evolve. I think in the previous segment, there was we were talking about the nationalization of the Space Force, and we see a lot of right-wing ideologies on Roblox yelling about Roblox socialism and so forth. So I think that the Labour Party is going to have to evolve and look towards the center-left ground to try to move forward in order to garner more support, and we intend to do so.
Well, all right. I hope your future is bright, and we'll move to Nero. How do you feel about the Libertarian results so far, given the exit poll? Narrow.
He's unmuted.
Well,
Good.
we'll move back to Thomas for now. We'll speak a little bit more about, I suppose, where you see the role of labor and kind of working in opposition. What do you think opposition really needs to do if the Conservatives are back in government?
Well, the first thing that I want to say, something that concerned me earlier in the election discussion chat, was mentions of this parliamentary term not lasting long. And typically we don't see hung parliaments such as this last for a long period of time. However, I would like to say that the Labour Party is willing to work with any and all actors in government and opposition to effectively help govern the nation. I think that mentioning that a Lord's government may occur is concerning, and a Lord's government is undemocratic, with no disrespect to the Lords, of course. However, the people voted in this election, and I think the will of the people should be heard. And regardless if the parliament is hung or not, and if there's a three-party coalition government, Labour intends to advocate for policies that we campaigned on and to work across party lines to try to make sure that Britain is governed effectively.
Right, okay, and Nara, are you back? Because I would like to ask you a similar question, especially with the Libertarians projected for second or third place right now in the exit poll.
We might need to get a new Libertarian representative there.
A little unfortunate. So I guess we'll go back to you, Connor, at the main desk while we do that.
Yeah, we'll find a new Libertarian representative eventually. And in the meantime, we can discuss some Libertarian policies. Let me look through my little pamphlet to see if we have any ones that we can touch on that they did mention. It does seem we've already discussed all of them. So then we can just move on in general. We discussed the Space Force to an extent. Let's go back to the hashtag. Well, our stage managers find a new Libertarian representative. And then I'll discuss the seats real quick. But so while they're looking for a new Libertarian representative, let's see what Twitter has to say. More conversation about the National Ambulance Service. That really struck a chord, Phantom. Nan Grippenberg, the current Home Secretary and the Home Secretary for the Tories, says that the National Ambulance Service is now capable of operating independently, thanks to the amazing work of Alfie and Philip Deschard. We have other people commenting that...
I seem to have a talent of striking nerves.
You do have very good talent, and I'm proud of you. Oh, we do actually, important update from Liberal Democrat head Q. Jay Cunningham has ruled out a coalition with the Lit Dems and the Conservatives. Interesting development there. That's closing more doors that the Tories had in trying to form government and opening doors for the high Tories and Libertarians. So yeah, in terms of the Space Force, there are comments from some saying that if the Space Force wants to be considered a serious company, they should be more realistic with their launch planning. Perhaps there's not enough realism in the Space Force for nationalization. Others have said that it shouldn't be considered prior to the initial launch of the Space Force to the moon. And others have explained very clearly that they support firmly nationalization of the Space Force. Interesting there. We are ready now. Sid MK06 is in the party desk with Torm. We can go back there.
All right, well, welcome back. I guess we'll begin again with our Libertarian candidate here. How are you feeling so far with the Libertarian result?
Well, obviously, we've gained the seats that we wanted to. We get the border seat for one of our candidates, and yeah, we're feeling good so far. Just looking to see how the election's going to go. Hoping for the best, obviously.
Do you think, I would say so far, that the Libertarians have performed to the party's expectations, the leadership? Like, where do you think Henry's head is at right now?
Well, Henry is feeling pretty good right now. We've done our best to campaign. Yeah, really, we've done our best. Not really much I can say right now.
All right, that's fair enough. And how do you think your party's done?
The party, we've campaigned pretty well. The party's looking good so far. We're aiming for a coalition, hopefully. We haven't made any plans yet, but obviously we will do that in the meantime.
All right, and Tom, I'd like to welcome you back. I suppose with this discussion of nationalization and expanding the role of government, where do you think, if somehow your party ended up in government, what would be your first duty?
Well, the first thing I would like to explore, which I was criticized on the campaign trail, was I would like to see a commission established to explore the possibility of devolution. Now, everyone has been kind of going insane with talking about devolution and how it's not, something that can be achieved. However, I think if we take the necessary and proper steps of establishing the commission in conjunction with group administration, development, parliament, and government, and I believe I said developers already, I think that devolution is something that can be achieved. I think that that's one of the first things that we need to look toward. And I also think that we need to look toward regional strategy in terms of foreign affairs, such as working with ASEAN and the African Union, and potentially working for the creation of a European Union. And that's something that has also been criticized. However, as I've said before, real life European politics does not equate to roadblocks. So that's all.
All right, and then same to you, Sid. Where do you think your party, if you somehow end up in government, regardless of your coalition partner at this point, what's the first duty?
Well, obviously, most parties have in the past haven't managed to complete what they've said in their manifesto. In our manifesto, we've aimed to put everything that we know that we can actually implement, and we've overall just made a respectable manifesto that all of our candidates will be able to implement into the government, and obviously just do our best, do whatever we can, and live up to our manifesto supporters and the British citizens.
Do you have a specific policy that you think sets you apart from the other parties, especially with the high Tories? I know we just heard that any coalition with the Conservatives is out of the question with them, but I feel like if you really want to find yourself in government, you have to sell yourself somehow with whatever crowning policy that you can unite people around.
Yeah, well, as a candidate, as the Home Secretary candidate, I've obviously been making preparations for the worst and the best scenario, and I've already spoke with LAS Gold Command about earlier subjects, such as how most parties used to say about their reinstatement forms, and they said that usually it'd be working that most people would be dishonorably discharged, and that's why the reinstatement forms never work. So obviously we've just been making communication with departments already, making sure that we live up to all of our manifesto and doing whatever we can to just live up to what we can as we're currently not in government yet. We've gained 4 seats already, and it's looking good so far.
All right, well, I wish both of you the best of luck, and we'll go back to Connor.
Thank you very much, and we'll go to the map in just a moment. But let's talk in general about where the state of the parties is now. One moment. We're not going to the map in a moment. Actually, we still have a few more seats to go before we want to go to the map. But so we see the Conservatives have 11 seats, the High Tories have 4, Labour 1, the Libertarians 5, the Liberal Democrats 1, UKIP 2, and NAFLAS has his seat. So, as we can see, it's a very interesting result, namely because the opposition is a little more clear who it's scattered between, if that makes any sense. The Libertarians and High Tories together are neck and neck as the Conservatives are going ahead still. I wonder how much of this, though, is just a magnifying glass from NAFLAS's well, when you take his votes out, you reduce turnout by a lot. I think Nathlis got, let me see if I can get the total count. Nathlis got well over 100 votes and maybe over 150 votes. So if the turnout was 413, you're taking out invalids. You're going to find that like the Tories to get, what they have in the exit poll, the Tories might need 100 votes only to get however many seats they have in the exit poll. 19 in the exit poll. That's not a lot. That's not a lot at all. That before 100 votes would, like Karenka, I remember Karenka Novak in his election with the Liberal Democrats, he got like over my record, 150, and came a distant second. Like 100 votes to get 19 seats around there. That's not a lot of votes at all. So Nathlis has really magnified differences to where what would have been a difference of 1 seat is now a difference of 5 seats or whatever. So stuff like that. We'll go real quick to the Twitter. UKIP reaffirms that they will oppose the EU. As mentioned, there's a lot to discuss when it comes to foreign affairs. Let's go to Fentum. One real quick. I want to get your opinion. Do you think an EU is a worthwhile venture? Fent.
Sorry. Yeah. There we go. Well, we saw the EU before, didn't we? A little bit of time ago. I mean, it's bringing up a few memories actually. I think it's not a worthwhile venture, to be honest. I think focus on the Commonwealth. One idea that was brought into the Commonwealth, Edward brought it in, is about the Commonwealth policing thing. I wanted to do that in my government as well. I remember actually proposing it as a thing, but we never got around to it because of all the Noosa wars and the various things that had gone on in my government. It's one of the policies that I really regret not putting more emphasis on. But that was quite interesting, and to see it now come back in the form of the Commonwealth is going to help quite a lot, because I think the Commonwealth is in a weird place at the moment and it doesn't really know what to do with itself, to be quite frankly honest. And of course, we've got the Commonwealth forces, but with this addition to Commonwealth policing, I think it's really going to sort of take off. And I think governments need to pay more attention to that and the other opportunities that are coming along, rather than thinking about new organisations such as forming an EU, because I don't think it'll be very beneficial. There's a few other organisations out there, new ones, that have got some type of basically the prospectus. The word's gone out of my head. They're looking good, essentially. They're looking good. And I think we need to keep an eye on the wider community instead of actively going out and trying to form organisations that are quite limited to what they can do, such as the EU. I think if we're going to go for organisations, go big.
Fair point. Very fair point. Singh, do you have any comments? Is the EU?
I definitely concur with what Fentum just said there about going big. It's the wrong place to put focus in, and I think it's lazy policy to be trying to look at that. Not trying to be rude. We need to be looking at the international stage on a much bigger level, and if we're serious about foreign affairs, reconnecting with that community through some kind of
definitely some type of organization, whatever that may form, and whatever opportunities
maybe nations that are united in some way.
Yeah, in some way like that. Let's go now to Torm with Nathlis at the party desk, just the two of them, for an in-depth interview now, because Nathlis, of course, a stellar moment in this campaign was what he did, and his team. Let's hear what they have to say, what Torm has to say.
Well, Nathlis, thank you for joining us, firstly. I'm going to let you make an opening statement before we get to questions about what you thought about your campaign and really the state of things.
So obviously, when I decided to run as an independent, there was a lot of discussion. I was messaging multiple people what they thought of what my decision was. Should I do it? Should I not? What was the cons? What was the pros? I could have lost being a long-serving MP. I could have lost anything. But after the term had ended, I was just decided, you know what, let's take the risk, let's go be an independent. I thought maybe I'd get 30, 40 supporters. I am completely overwhelmed with all the support I've received over the past week. I cannot thank my supporters enough, and the help I've received from some of my good friends with campaigning a tiny bit. And yeah, it's just completely overwhelming to me. I'm just thankful for everything.
Right, and I would say that beyond any potential questions and criticisms and changes that come to how campaigns are run in the future, that you've done something very remarkable here with your team. Becoming an independent is nothing easy, and the amount of votes you got is certainly impressive, even for an actual party. But that being said, how do you think, given you are only running for the speaker and you will not actually be active in any of the politics or policies, the things you propose to people, how do you think that changes things? Like, what do you say to that criticism?
Well, when I was going out speaking to people, my current supporters, they were telling me what they had issues with parties currently standing, why they couldn't support parties. And obviously I was speaker last term, I had a good track record with that. And I think they wanted someone who would be strong in the chair, would be able to keep order in debate, make sure Parliament is heading on track, that sessions were taking place, that there was enough time for questioning, debates were enabled, and also my other policies like the bill helping scheme to help MPs, and also parliamentary surgeries, which we tried out last term, which seem, obviously, with politics being an increase, more people get involved, which I think I will do a few more this term, get more people involved, and I think we will see more people becoming involved in that. Really, I think politics is becoming more opening, which is always what I've been planning to do. I want more people to be involved. If they have an issue, they need to take it to an MP who can bring it up in Parliament. Sometimes issues aren't resolved and they just end up being ignored. If someone has a key issue, then they should come to an MP. MPs should be accessible to that, which they can then question the government or propose a debate or ask for help writing the legislation for it, speak to party leaders. It should be more open to everyone. It should be a more open thing.
I would say, while that is an admirable ideal, right? The institutionalization of Parliament and making it more open to the public is a noble goal, but I would say so far what we've seen from the parties, at least, is that there is the disconnect between adequate governance and the trust of the people, that we've had a series of prime ministers who had been, I would say, disconnected from the desires of the people. And do you really think that the people want just a strong speaker? Do you really think that people in WAS are going to benefit directly from you taking their vote instead of investing it in a party and seeing tangible benefit from that sort of investment?
Well, it depends what the people have decided to go with. Yes, of course, the person who is governing our country, leading the government, is obviously crucial to, obviously, again, how Parliament proceeds. But voting for the people who voted for me know what I am capable of in the chair, know what I can bring to Parliament in terms of that way of parliamentary reform and some of my plans. And yes, trust within our system in politics is at a real low at the moment. No one knows who really to trust. But with stuff like contacting MPs, parliamentary surgeries, people bringing their issues to the House, I think that will slowly bring the trust up much more. And then over the next few terms, it's not just going to be this term, which we'll see trust being built up, but I think trust will continue to build up. I think obviously last term with the situations with Josh Miller, and over the past few terms we've seen certain different things, and I think that's affected the trust, but I definitely feel that trust will start building up again within the next few terms, and especially this term.
I'll leave with this question, because as you pointed out that you do want to have these plans, do you think you really just run for speaker in a public campaign versus actually working with parties and trying to figure out a way to work with actual parliamentarians on how to run Parliament? Instead, you've appealed to the public as a way to legitimize whatever rule you're going to put in place, as a way to, I would say, ostracize the opinions and controversies of parliamentary parties. I mean, we saw that with Charles Cunningham trying to put through new parliamentary orders, and you were in the middle of that sort of debate in Parliament. Have you really kind of undermined the actual way elections are supposed to be ran by making your own position as speaker being elected by popular vote versus actually finding yourself within the parliamentary system?
No, I don't agree with that question at all, because if people want to connect with Parliament more, this is the way the plans which I propose, the connection through parliamentary surgeries and other plans I have in place to get MPs more involved with the people. People want to be more involved, and that's for the parties. If they want to be involved, I can't force them to do anything, obviously, to join these plans I have, to take them on board and actually start building the trust with me, instead of, let's just say one party doesn't want to do it, then I can't force them to do anything. But if they wish to join in, then that is a good thing. We can start building up parliamentary trust together. I'm obviously welcome to working with everyone in Parliament. I think all MPs have a good chance from the very beginning to start working hard and putting their effort in and not using their voices, standing up for obviously the people who voted for them and their parties. I think that's a crucial thing which needs to happen.
All right, well, thank you for your insight, Nathis, and it's a very interesting conversation we've had that we'll let Connor in the main desk talk about.
Indeed, there's a lot to talk about there, and in just a moment, I believe we're ready to pan over to the map. Yes, I believe we're ready to pan over to the map right now, and when we do, we can see the changes, and I'm going to just mention, and I'll compare this to the last few elections and show everyone what has changed over that period. Once we just see, or we can see the map now. Perfect. So the first thing that hits me is that Scotland is blue. The Tories still have their foothold in Scotland, and an important thing to note when you look at the constituency system is how some of the seats have actually moved around. Glasgow used to be a very firm Conservative seat. Edinburgh used to be a very firm Liberal Democrat seat. Highland and Islands, Aberdeen, all of these were so firmly Liberal, and at a time Labour, when Labour really had that big growth. And what I really find interesting is how you can see the remnants of the Liberal Democrats rebranding to the Conservatives in Scotland being blue. You can also see the collapse of Labour in the fact that the North is right now more blue than red. Which is just intriguing, because the North used to be very, very aggressively red. I think there was a very red wall, so to speak, if we're going to parrot real life, that Labour had. You know, Theo Novak is going to be returning to Parliament as Member of Parliament for North Yorkshire. He was Member of Parliament for North Yorkshire when he was leader of the New Tories, or the New Labour Party. It's interesting to look at. The Labour Party has just receded so much more than I think anyone thought would happen with the New Labour Party. You can also see the Libertarians occupying a lot of space that used to be High Tory land. That happened, or they used to rather be Imperial land. Of course, that's not the case anymore. The Imperial Party pretty much split into the High Tories and Libertarians. But you can see, those areas, I remember specifically mentioning when Fent was on a different desk at this program, pointing to the, west of England and saying, these areas, this shows that the Imperial Party is going to get the majority. For the High Tories, of course, there's a bitter memory that from the days of being a majority government to now fighting tooth and nail for second place. You also see UKIP peering out of anywhere. You see two UKIP MPs so far called, just sort of poking their heads out and starting to demonstrate how there isn't any solid land for anyone. We can really only identify maybe London and then Scotland as heartlands, and those are both Tory heartlands. The Libertarians are scattered everywhere. The High Tories are scattered everywhere. A big note for the High Tories is they have had a very fun time controlling Northern Ireland. They've had always a majority, 2 out of the 3 seats in Northern Ireland. The Imperials had it, the High Tories had it. Now's the question is if they're going to hold that seat, the other Ulster seat in Northern Ireland, that's not a bad sign for the High Tories at all. That's probably a pretty good sign for them, but at least they're not going to be making major losses. Wales, of course. I look at Wales. Wales is blue, very blue right now. It's insane that we have that. The Conservatives are, in effect, the second farthest left party here, which, we can talk about how incredibly to the right our political structure is. But yeah, we will soon be getting people in game for another interview. We will have Henry Cathcart and Slip, both leaders, and that'll be some fun stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting result we're getting so far. I'll go to Twitter while we prepare the party desk. And we'll be able to start calling seats again because we had to hold off for the map. So you'll expect a few seats to come in really quickly. But yeah, okay, let's continue looking now at Twitter while they finish calling seats and preparing the party desk. So some people are mentioning that they don't think there's a point in voting for Nathlis because he can't do much as an independent and as speaker again. Nathlis, of course, disagreed with that. He is very, very much of the opinion that he will do a lot in office, and his supporters evidently think that. Though I think there's some interesting points that I don't know if his supporters completely believe that Nathlis is running for speaker again. I think some of them actually think he's going to run for prime minister, whatever that might be. Some interesting statistics with the Tory seats. They have secured 12 seats, which means that's enough for their cabinet. But they've also made at least 3 losses, which means the Tories have lost their majority. That's not a surprise. I don't think anyone's surprised. But we're officially in a hung parliament territory, and every loss the Tories have is how further away from a majority government and how much more hung this parliament will be. Doug Damadome is very glad to be re-elected as Member of Parliament for Lancashire. They put a lot of effort into winning that seat because that was, their third in command seat. I'm not sure if they've called Nottingham yet. It'll be coming up real soon. They'll be calling Nottingham. But yeah, we'll be moving real close over to the next stream, or over to the next party desk. But in the meantime, let's continue. Let's just discuss with, okay, we've called some seats. We're calling seats as they come now. Apologies for that delay. We were caught up by the interview and we had to put the map up. But you'll get a bunch of seats quick. We will know the results within the next 10 to 15 minutes and parties can start negotiating. But yeah, so we've discussed a lot of Labour's unique ideas, but then let's turn now to the DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. Evidently, election night is a product of media and the growing interest in it and cultural events. Should the BBC be nationalised? Should the government be hosting more of these cultural events? What is the role of the government in procuring British culture? I will go first to Phantom, and then to Torm, and then we'll go with Torm to the party desk. So Phantom, should the DCMS come back, what should the government be doing with this venture into culture, and how should the government be involved in making Westbridge more interesting?
I had this discussion with someone a couple of nights ago. I can't actually remember who it was, but we were just talking essentially about how much media has come across and how much news outlets and stuff have developed, and especially with this new scheme with local news and stuff like that coming out and developer involvement, it's really starting to push the media industry more and more and more. And it's interesting because we used to have media secretaries before, we used to have media departments, etc., but never to the scale that we have it now. And I think this is the time now to give it that little bit more of a boost, give it that little bit more of a kick, and sort of allow people to have a little bit more to do with it. And I think bringing in a media office and bringing in stuff like that is actually a good time to do it at the moment. And I think the Treasury and whatever party comes in should keep registering media companies and should keep registering newspapers and stuff, because not only are they getting more popular and more talked about, there's more interest in them. People are, moving forward a lot more. And I think instead of seeing national companies now or international companies, some of them, we'll now start to see local companies come through as well, especially with this local directive. Again, I think it's all based on developers, how much they add to it, how much they take off with it. But of course, one of the main developers that's really forward with this, George Kildery, he's really enthusiastic about this sort of stuff, and he seems to be quite interested. And I think it's a good avenue to explore down, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I personally have always been a fan of the Department for Culture, Media, and Sport. That's just been one of my favorite things. But yeah, we're going to be having to turn the live chat off because of some people doing things they shouldn't be doing. But you can continue to comment with Election Night RX. Make sure we want to hear your voices. So we do have someone commenting on what was just mentioned with the DCMS. Sid MK says that as the one who primarily suggested with a lot of support that local news is re-added. Of course, everyone wants Westbridge to be a bit more interesting. It is a very good year for the media. I mean, I have to agree. And maybe the DCMS can do something with that. They can, use the media in a more tangible way. I know the High Tories, which Slip is in studio now, ready to talk to us in just a minute once we finish this conversation, and we're ready to pan over to them. Camera crew, keep a note of that. They suggested a universal press hub, which does currently exist, but it doesn't really exist. It's not active. I think it'll be interesting to see what governments do with media, and the more cabinet secretaries that have work to do, the better, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not to say that we need to aggressively expand the size of government, but it's not a problem if, there's more things for more policies for us and politicians to discuss. We'll check in a minute to move over to we're not actually going to be turning live chat off. We have a different plan to how to deal with those naughty rebels. But we will be moving over to the party desk soon once I get a nod from the camera team that we're ready to go there. But in the meantime, we can summarize the results and say that the Conservatives are 2 off from the exit poll. The High Tories are 5 off from the exit poll. They might fall short of that exit poll. Labour is smack dab on the exit poll. The Libertarians are only 2 off the exit poll. The Lit Dems are 2 off. UKIP 3 off. And the Independents have 1. There's a strong Conservative lead. There is sort of a clear opposition form that it might be the Liberals, but we don't exactly know. We're going to figure that out the closer we get to the end, because the exit poll projects them tied. And so either something's gone horribly wrong in the High Tories, or they just have seats waiting for them at the end. Once we're ready to pan over, we'll pan over to the party desk where Torm has Slip and Slurp. Love that alliteration. Torm, you ready there?
Yep. All right, I guess we'll begin with you, Slip, as I would say, the big boy on campus now with the new High Tory party. How are you feeling so far with your results?
Looking at the results now, 4 seats. There's obviously, I think there's like 16 more seats to be called, so I'm hoping we get a good percentage of that so that we can actually get a good amount of seats. But looking at the exit polls, it's all right. I would have liked more originally, but I mean, I predict to get a slightly more than 9 seats.
So do you see, just using the exit poll number, let's say 9, is that a success for your policy and your party in the first election, or do you think you underperformed?
I think we probably would have underperformed it, as 9 seats is only 1 more seat than last election. We won it last election. As I say, I would have predicted more before seeing the polls, but hopefully there's still a few more seats to call, so hopefully they just go my way.
All right, and then Slurp, as the new leader of the Libertarians, how are you feeling so far with these exit poll numbers?
Yeah, we're feeling pretty good. I mean, we've made decent gains, especially having Aldrich's seat, Nathless's seat going, which leaves us with around 6 seats. I do believe we're at 7 seats now, so that is a gain. As long as we keep it up, we're just going to be in good standing in this election. And overall, I'm just proud of what the campaign team has done.
So you're declaring this a success?
I mean, at the current moment, we are gaining seats, so it is good. It's not like we're losing seats. We're not underperforming. We didn't come in this election with a major goal. Like we didn't plan on doing incredible. So anything that's gaining seats is pretty good for us.
Right. So I guess that leads me to my next question, considering we've heard the conservative leader, Josh Radcliffe, talk about absolutely no coalition with the high Tories. Where do you see your party going with the current seat count you have?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in discussions with my cabinet, and we are not pursuing a coalition with the Tory government or a Tory party. So we're just going to go from there. Absolutely ruling it out, just not going to happen. We'll see what the other parties in opposition want to do, but from there we'll just have to wait and see.
And Slip, how do you feel about that? No coalition with the Tories.
I mean, I think that's a good thing because nobody wants a coalition with the Tories after this term. But as for the high Tories, we're currently looking at our options to see what we could do after the election is over.
Right. So I guess given that both of you will not coalition with the Conservatives, will you consider a coalition with one another?
It would certainly be something that would be looked into, but it just depends on what happens after the election, of course.
What do you think about that, Slurp?
Things on the table. We will pursue anything. I mean, at the current moment, we aren't too sure about the election results. So, I mean, we can't undeniably make a promise or just predict what's going to happen. But certainly, it's something that we will be looking into.
Right, because if you don't both form a coalition in some way, you're going to have a permanently hung parliament, leaving you with the option of either passing the King's Speech and dealing with the fractured, come what may, legislation that's associated with that, or you fail the King's Speech and you go to another election. I mean, with that on the table, where do you think is the best option for both of you? I guess we'll begin with Slip.
What was the question? I wasn't actually paying attention. I thought you were going to go to Henry first.
Given you can either pass the King's Speech or fail it.
Well, if it's a Conservative one, we'll obviously speak with the other parties to see if we should pass their King's Speech. Obviously, we don't support the Conservatives entering another government, so as you could probably imagine, we would be urging the other parties not to do that. But as we say, it would just turn out as to what happens after the election and what the other parties are thinking.
Slurp.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, we will work in tandem with the other opposition parties and determine what the best option is going forward if it is a conservative government. This nation has been, I guess, plagued with this conservative government, so it wouldn't be wise to continue with it, but we'll just have to see the state of parliament after this election and make the best decision going from there.
Well, on that note, I'll leave you both with one question, and we'll go to Slurp first. What do you think your party will actually do if you do find yourself in power? What do you offer to the nation?
I mean, we've laid out our promises very simply in our manifesto, which is just realistic and attainable policy, which we do plan on implementing. It's just sensible policy and policy that has the potential to truly kickstart our nation or truly put us on the right path. So we're just going to go from there, stick by our promises, something that this conservative government hasn't. Just going to stick behind our base and just listen to our supporters and listen to the nation.
And then Slip will end with you.
Well, the high Tories are pretty much the same. We'll obviously try to implement our policy. It would just be to fulfill our promises made this election to the people who actually voted for us and support us. And we will also be listening to the public on what the next government will actually be doing, because God knows what they could do. If it's another Conservative one, then we all know that there'll not be much done anyway, so we'll just have to make sure that work is actually done no matter what.
Right, well, I wish you both the best of luck, and I hope that we do come to some sort of conclusion, so we don't find ourselves back here on election night in 2 weeks. Connor.
Yes. On that topic, I was just going to mention I've seen a few tweets now, one from James Alex Hayes that says we need a coalition or another election. Let's be honest, this isn't going to be very clear with the results. I do not want to be a party leader tonight because it's going to be an interesting pathway for them trying to figure out where the road to number 10 is. You know, you look at some of these graphics. I'm personally looking at the Guardians graphics, and there's so many like different parties. Like, obviously we know that, but you look at it, you see all the different parties. You see, you know, just that there's 6 parties and 1 independent, and these are all different factors with different manifestos, different cabinets, different leaders. That many personalities in a room is going to be really hard to work out. But so let's continue looking and just analyzing the seats. So Labour has lost 3 seats so far. UKIP has gained 2 of their seats. The Tories have lost 4 so far. The High Tories have gained none and lost none. The Libertarians have lost or gained 2 seats so far. The Lit Dems have gained 3, and NAFLIS, of course, gained 1. The Libertarians had a little bit of interesting stuff because they lost 1 seat to NAFLIS, and I believe they lost 1 seat but then gained another. So the Libertarians are not losing seats this election. They just happen to lose a few seats. So I think they're even or maybe +1. I don't know if the Guardian has that one exactly right. But now that we're getting close to the end, very, very close. It's 19 on the Tories, 7 for the High Tories, 3 for Labour, 9 for the Libertarians, 4 for the Lit Dems, only 2 for UKIP, and 1 for the Independent. The Conservatives have matched their poll, so the exit poll. So they're either going to be above the exit poll or just on it. The High Tories are 2 off from the exit poll. The Labour Party is spot on the exit poll. The Libertarians are on par with the exit poll. The Lit Dems on par with the exit poll. UKIP fallen pretty short from that exit poll, and NAFLIS on the exit poll. So, Fent, then Torm. Who do you think's going to win? Who do you think's going to form opposition, rather? It's obvious the Tories have come first. Who's coming second? Yeah, who's coming second? Who's coming third? And then who do you think is going to be Prime Minister in a few, 24 hours, if we have a Prime Minister in 24 hours? So who comes second and who's going to be Prime Minister in 24 hours? Just your gut. You don't have to totally know.
Connor, you know when I get nervous, and I had this, every election night I have it when I'm running. What happens is, in the bottom of my teeth, I get a tingling sensation. I swear to God, and I'm feeling this sensation now, even though I'm not in a party. And it's, I'm sat here going red because of how tight it actually is. And honestly,
actually, I have something I want to give you. I just got word from Labour camp that they are relying to see whether or not they win Cardiff, which is coming up really soon, to see what they will do in regards to coalitions and supply and confidence agreements.
There ain't many seats left at all.
Cardiff is 1 more seat than Cardiff, so then we're going to know more. So you have to make your gut decision, though. Who do you think is going to come second, and who do you think will be Prime Minister?
Okay, right. Let's go. From my gut, I think Conservatives first. I think they're going to, from the seats that are left, I think they're going to stop dead at 20 or 21. 20. Then I think Libertarians, High Tories, then, of course, Liberal Democrats, Labour and UKIP. In terms of governments, I think we're going to see something so messed up. It's going to be absolutely fantastic, I think. We're going to see High Tory, Labour, Liberals. Honestly, I think we're going to see an absolute rainbow, and UKIP jumping in there somewhere.
A rainbow opposition
this
to
is
the
going to
Tories,
be
then.
absolutely mad, I think. I think the Tories are getting the doors shut right on them.
Interesting.
I'd be surprised to see any party really coalition with them. And even if they did, it still leaves a minority, doesn't it?
Yep. Since both the High Tories and Libertarians ruled out a coalition with the Tories.
There looks like Cardiff's just been declared Labour.
Oh, Cardiff is a poll for
go.
Labour. Congrats. Congrats. Oh, and Finchley has been called. That's a good sign. Good sign for Labour, and that means that we're going to know more about their coalition negotiations. And this is when it's going to be fun in a moment. after we have all the seats and they start fighting, we're going to be getting the drama slipped through us. All the back channel DMs I'm going to get from random members of parliament. But yeah, so we're ready to almost go live. Or we're already live. I mean, we're almost ready to see the ends of the results. We only have 2 seats left, and West Ulster and Edinburgh. West Ulster, the High Tories need to hold this, and if in a very honest opinion, the High Tories need to hold this if they are to accomplish what they wanted to. We're going to slow down the results because the EC is going to do a quick vetting. But I want to go to Torm. Same question. Who do you think is going to win? Who's going to come second? Who's going to come third? And then who's going to be prime minister?
Well, we know the Tories are going to be by far the largest party, which automatically makes, at least for the foreseeable future until negotiations really reach their peak, that Josh Miller is the prime minister presumptive.
Of course.
We have High Tories and the Libertarians. Libertarians, and as you just said, have ruled out a coalition with the Conservatives, so that only leaves the High Tories and Libertarians to make a coalition amongst themselves. Now, given the current seat count, I think the Libertarians are probably going to either stay at 9 or pick up 1 at the most, leaving the majority of the seats somewhere between UKIP, Libertarians, and High Tories. Now, between the 3 of them, they can't actually form a majority, if I'm correct, right? I don't think that adds up.
We don't totally know yet.
So as right now, with my predictions, I don't think it adds up to a majority, but it's higher than what the Tories have. So no matter what, we're going to be facing a minority government. Now, with that being said, I don't think this government survives 2 weeks if the King's Speech even begins to pass. So whoever is actually crowned the winner is on borrowed time. So God bless these parties for having to make the decision on what to do, because I would not want to be in those back rooms right now trying to decide. Each party has a very large target on their back from each other, I would say, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow.
And I mean, I feel bad for the king right now, because he's going to have to listen to all these different proposals, and we might end up getting a very uncomfortable situation. Though, I have a breaking news from the Lit Dem headquarters. They are open to going into a coalition with the High Tories and Libertarians on the condition they get Minister for Ireland. I don't know if they mean Secretary of State for Northern Ireland or a sub-cabinet ministry, and Minister for Employment. I don't know, again, if that means Chancellor or whatnot. It's not clear to me. But that's an interesting situation. We're going to get ready to call the next and final 2 seats, West Ulster and Edinburgh. It'll be something to watch. But yeah, so we have the Lit Dems making moves on the exit poll, because, well, the exit poll doesn't really matter anymore. Let me try and get the results as they are. The High Tories, Libertarians together have 16. The Lit Dems give them 20. They still need Labour or UKIP to join that. We know now Cardiff was called for Labour. I think that means they're going to be engaged in coalition talks. So it's going to rely now on UKIP, what UKIP does, and what Labour does. Labour and UKIP can re-elect the Tories. The High Tories, Libertarians, Liberal Democrats, and UKIP can form a government. It's going to be intense in those backroom negotiations. And honestly, not to be rude, but I worry that a government with like 4 parties, let alone 4 very different parties. We were saying 3 parties wouldn't work. 4 parties, that'll be interesting. And I think the Tories might end up needing 4 parties too if it continues on their thing. Okay, we have seen West Ulster is a High Tory hold. High Tories have 8 seats then. The next seat is Edinburgh. It's a Conservative-held seat. The Liberal Democrats are the nearest competitor. It's going to be a factor on whether or not the Liberal Democrats can pick up Edinburgh. The Labour Party is also trying to contest Edinburgh. They have a chance of picking it up, though it's between Labour, the Liberal Democrats, and the Tories right now in Edinburgh. This is intense. If the Tories hold it, they can form a coalition with Labour. If the Tories hold Edinburgh, they can form a coalition with Labour as is. If Labour holds it, they can also form a coalition with the Tories, and they kind of keep everyone else from forming government. And if Nathless does go for Speaker, then they have won. Because remember, Nathless being Speaker means they only really need 25, because one of the seats is already allotted for the Speaker candidate. So now we have to look at this like, the numbers are going to be interesting. If the Tories hold it, oh no. If the Liberal Democrats pick it up, that's giving ammo. So 8 seats for the High Tories, 9 for the Libertarians, and then if the High Tories pick up Edinburgh, or the Liberal Democrats pick up Edinburgh, that would be 6. That would be Edinburgh was called for the Liberal Democrats. So that's 5. We have the results, guys. 20 for the Conservatives, 8 for the High Tories, 4 for the Labour Party, 9 for the Libertarians, 5 for the Liberal Democrats, 3 for UKIP, and 1 for Independent. Phantom, first reactions.
Oh my god. I don't even know where to start here, to be honest. Minority government, whatever. Honestly, I'd hate to be in this position right now. It's giving me, again, it's just reminding me of all my past experiences. I don't know if you remember, when Theo's second government came along, and at that time it was Imperials and Conservatives, and we merged last minute to try and get a coalition with Liberal Democrats. I don't know if you remember that. And it's bringing up all these memories again, and honestly, it'll be fantastic to see what actually happens. I still think, though, we'll see a weird combination here. I can't see much support going towards the Tories, to be quite frankly honest. But just straight from the results, fantastic. One thing I really want to see is the vote split. How many votes did Nathless actually get?
It's about to go out. 193.
Bloody hell. That's literally a party, isn't it, really?
It totally is. So 193 votes for Nathless in the whole, and like Nathless has the mandate here, yet he's not going to be a part of the coalition negotiations. Torm, now we know the results. You had your gut feelings, now you know the results. It's 20 seats for the Tories, 8 for the High Tories, how many for the Libertarians? 9 for the Libertarians, 5 for the Liberal Democrats, 3 for UKIP, and 1 for the Independents. Gut feeling, what coalition is it going to be?
Well, let's make one thing clear quickly.
Yes.
Nathless got the most votes, but he is not elected Speaker. It would be quite hilarious if all the other parties, being upset with Nathless, decided not to elect him as Speaker, given how many votes he actually garnered in this sort of vanity campaign about how being Speaker and all these parliamentary things he did would be. I just think that's an interesting proposition, given how crazy things are going. But moving forward, what coalition do you think we're going to see? Now, Conservatives have absolutely no partners besides potentially UKIP. Now, that gets them to 23 Labour. That'd be quite cursed. The both of them get them to 28 seats, which would be more than enough for a majority. However, I don't think it's going to happen because Kelvin obviously would have no interest in working with a Tory government as Labour. They've already talked about doing nationalization policies, all these sort of active government roles that the Conservatives cannot swallow. So that leaves us with a 4-way coalition between Lit Duns, the Libertarians, High Tories, and UKIP. That gets them to 25, I believe, if my math is correct. There has been precedent in the past for the King to reject such coalitions because it's just far too unstable. They don't really work, and it's more of a political play to undermine the party which got the largest votes. So between that, the most likely scenario is just a straight up conservative minority government, which I think will probably fail the King's speech, and I'll see you, Connor, and Phantom, and Sangus back here in 2 weeks with a renewed electorate and likely Nathless not running again, I would say, in the same way that he did this election.
Indeed. Crazy, isn't it? Crazy. We might be back here again. Who knows, though? It's going to be really the call of the King, I think, to an extent. And I know this King has very effectively been able to keep himself out of politics, as most kings have. So maybe it will be left up to the electorate again, a second time. Honestly, honestly. If any parties have any comments, I'd love to hear them. I have a scoop. There's currently being a Tory Labour National Coalition is currently being explored with UKIP. UKIP then becomes the factor here. UKIP and the Labour, smallest parties in this parliament, but they're the parties with the most power. Either way, we're getting a 3-party coalition. It's either 4-party with Lib Dem, High Tory, Liberals, and UKIP, or Labour, or Tory Labour UKIP, because no 2 parties can govern by themselves. With Labour, UKIP support, my bad. UKIP would be endorsing it, but would not be a part of the government. I should clarify that. That's still a 3-party agreement, which is insane. Still, it's going to be interesting. And that would be a minority government, a minority coalition, which again, as Torm says, is precedent for being denied. God bless. That's a lot to take in here. We're always waiting for scoops from parties, but discussions are ongoing. Labour has confirmed that discussions are ongoing, so if the Tories have confirmed that, well, yeah. So we've been confirmed that there are some discussions. So the possible coalitions, Conservative and Labour have 24. Libertarians, High Tories, Liberal Democrats, and UKIP have 25 just on the dot. The Libertarians, High Tories, Liberal Democrats, UKIP, and Labour have 29. It's very tense negotiations. I think, recalling from the votes, there is going to be a very small recount, just because I know 1 vote wasn't counted, but that 1 vote won't affect the results. It's just me being particularly anal. And the Tories will definitely have their 20 seats. And even with UKIP, yeah, it'll be a very interesting result nonetheless. And I don't think results will change at all. It's 1 vote, just so that I can say that every vote was fully counted. But yeah, it's interesting to look. We have seen a lot tonight. Tell me what you think. I want to see your comments on Twitter now. This is where your time is to shine. I'll go through the Twitter right now. James Alex Hayes says that he thinks the Tories and Labour need to form a coalition, or it has to be a second election. The Liberal Democrats are tweeting that they're very happy that they won the final seat of this election. And someone has mentioned, interestingly, that Josh Radcliffe should go for Deputy Prime Minister in some coalition. I don't know where that logic comes from. Margaret Monti has been re-elected in Finchley. Jonas Von Kanzaki has been re-elected in Cardiff. That was a seat that people were not thinking they were going to hold. The fact they held on to Cardiff is a good sign for Labour, because they kept a lot of their team. Whether or not Jonas fills that seat, though, is a question that'll be answered later. Let's see. Epic Noah lost his seat, and there's a bit of joking around that. Sid is happy that the Libertarians are doing good. As a cabinet candidate, he says that he's happy with the seats they have. They were aiming for 10. They did not hit 10 in the end. They hit 9, but they're still happy as an accomplishment. The High Tories and the High Tory Liberal Minority Coalition, Timothy Cathcart, Member of Parliament for the Libertarians, is still pushing that there might be worth suggesting a minority coalition of the High Tories and Libertarians. Binny Boy 9 is saying that he's very content with this election. He thought it was interesting. He hopes to come back as Chancellor. Tarhe Osborne says that if we get a second election, interesting. If there's a second election, the British and Irish elections will occur within 1 week of each other, and the British election will occur at the same time as the Northern Irish election. Finally, we've seen it. Torm, you will like this. Vicky says that there should be no more independents, and that this is a sign that independents need to be banned.
So true. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's
fundamentally independents need to get out of this house. I agree fundamentally. Nathan can go down in history as the most successful independent candidate.
I'm sorry.
This is Nathan's here.
Tom's going mad at me.
It's fine. Well, that's not my decision to make. But so let's continue reading. No more independent candidates for hearing. So more people are saying it'll be a second election. A lot of people are saying it'll be a second election. It'll be interesting though, won't it, if the Tories actually hold on? Fent, Torm, come on, if the Tories actually hold on to this, imagine that.
The realistic situation is that they're not going to. Josh Radcliffe is far too unpopular amongst the parliamentarians, I would say. It's not going to happen.
Do you think the current agreement will fall apart?
Yes.
Interesting. That would be drama. That'd be like an Irish government formation where they spend 2 days discussing something and then agree at the end of the day they don't want to do it, which irritates the life out of me when they do that. But wow, you think it'll fall apart? Do you think it'll? So do you think Do you think it'll go to the High Tories and Libertarians then? Do you think that's the most likely alternative?
An alternative, yes, but it's not, again, a stable alternative. They're on borrowed
Not stable.
time right now. Like, no matter
We're
what
all on
happens,
borrowed time,
no
Yeah.
matter what happens, this government isn't making it the term. And that's just the realistic way to look at this.
Jeez, that'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting parliament to watch, and God, yeah. Oh, we have massive updates that apparently Bernie actually won the election, and that reiterating that like they have evidence he won. It's a graph that shows he won. I'll post it in UK election discussion if anyone wants to see the evidence. But yeah, all of this is wrong. Actually, my bad. Sorry. As you can see in the discussion, it's fraudulent because everyone else just jumped at the very end. But yeah. Continuing with the discussion of proportional representation, I think everyone on the panel, and let us know on Twitter in election discussion, and I'll do a question of the day just in the UK server for the sake of it. Should independents be allowed to run in the future? Yes, no, or a shrug. My Wi-Fi is moving a little slowly because I'm using a lot of it right now. Bless. Okay, Zoraby has chimed in to say, nope, they shouldn't. Oh, wow. Very firmly a no. Interesting. Even Nathless says no. Nathless is the prodigal son for independence. He's gone and been an independent and come back against it. Interesting. Sorry, I'm handling a little bit of EC business. There's some things going on in the background right now. Let's see. There's people just clowning. I gotta be honest. I feel bad for Epic Noah because people are clowning him right now. Obviously, of course, he lost his constituency. An important thing to note is that doesn't mean he's not going to stay in Parliament. It just means that he doesn't have that same seat. So he'll just, if he's been an active MP, he'll just go to a different seat if his party wants him to. We keep hearing now from libertarians. We heard interesting talks ongoing. We're going to stay on this stream for a little while for a bit because this is going to be a little interesting. Not forever, but I want to wait until we can hear at least something. So let's continue if we can get any more feedback. God. Let's see. So the independents, there's still a firm opposition to independents being allowed to run. Yeah, firmly against it. Interesting. We're seeing comments that okay, people are blaming the EC because they should blame the EC. I agree with them. Blame the EC. If a Lib Dem becomes Minister for Ireland, I'm not going to read that because that's sectarian. Sid MK, honestly, I think Nathless gaining so many votes caused an issue. Half the votes Nathless received could have led to a higher libertarian surge. Could have led to any other party doing well, but it's a fair point. We'll go for one more talking point. We were talking a lot about reforming Parliament in this term. This will be the last thing we discuss before we go into something else. And before we, shut down the show or move on to a different platform for just, the after talks. We were talking a lot about parliamentary reform right now. Backbench protection, changing the legislative process, maybe discussing why there's a lack of legislation. Tormund Fent, what's the deal with this? What's the deal? Is this still the term to implement all these reforms? Last time they got delayed because of the Imperial Populist Coalition, because there was concern about that. Is this still the term to implement, sovereignty of the commons, backbench protection? Is it the perfect time or the worst time?
Oh God, this is I think from a party's perspective, backbench protection right now it depends what happens with the government, doesn't it? If it is a four-way government or whatever, party whip or backbencher rights might jeopardise a few votes, put it that way. I think it's going to be tricky either way. I think the best thing for any party right now to do, if they're in any coalition talks at all, is come up with a firm structure of what they want passing and what they're willing to compromise and put aside. I think that's the only way that any sort of government is going to work. If it's going to be a four-party government, then it'll be absolutely clear from the offset that this is what we want passing and this is what we'll put aside for another election. And they need to follow that path quite strictly. And honestly, you've got to have some pretty good planning skills and agree everything in advance for this to work, or otherwise it's going to be tricky.
Indeed. It'll be a very tricky time. Just to clarify two things. One, parties. I know you're all listening to me. You go to Jeff Maltby to form a government, not Martin Charteris. Number two, there's two EC documents out, one that has more information and one that's just all the easy stuff you need. The one in announcements is accurate. The results are 20 seats for the Tories with 92 votes, 8 seats for the High Tories with 39 votes, 4 seats for Labour with 17 votes, 9 seats for the Libertarians with 43 votes, 5 seats for the Liberal Democrats with 21 votes, 3 seats for UKIP with 13 votes, and, of course, 1 seat for Nathless with 193. Can someone tell me what's wrong with that? What doesn't make sense in this picture? Okay. So, yeah, this is just an interesting period. We're still listening to comments, and there's still 70 of you on the stream. This is the normal amount of people we have on a stream. So if you have comments, if you have questions, if topics you would like us to hear out while we wait for more information from the parties. Oh, God, no. Yeah. Okay, so we have a comment from Gustav Rhodes. If backbench protections are to return, one of the most important issues must be solved is the fact is the consistent unfair sacking of MPs for doing nothing but having their own opinions. Gustav, who has been sacked many times for having many controversial opinions, says he knows well about that. Yeah. Interesting comments across the period. Yeah, so again, if you have comments or anything, Phantom, what do you think of right now when you're looking at all this madness? When you're looking
Oh
at
my god,
it's bedlam. Like, I've never seen an election with a result that's made this much silliness, I frankly think. Like, I've seen results that get like reactions, but like people are reacting much more than I thought they would to how complex this result is.
This is absolutely hectic, like really, really hectic. Again, I really don't know what's going to happen. I think I just have to wait and see. Honestly,
Just have to wait. Oh my god!
In terms of how Parliament's going to settle and all that stuff, honestly, again, I keep saying it. If there is any coalition talks going on right now about having high Tories, Labour, or whatever, they need to ensure that they know exactly what they're aiming for. They need to lay out all the targets in advance and hit them targets as they go along. Otherwise, it's just going to be chaos, isn't it?
Yes.
I think one thing
Fully.
that governments, coalition governments especially, fail on is working together, because all of a sudden they'll bring up a policy that hasn't been talked about or whatever, and then you have bedlam going on and people falling out here and there. So they need to be quite structured here and really agree with stuff. But I think one thing that unites all the parties at the moment is, and it sounds absolutely awful, but it's true, is the hatred for Conservatives. I think that's what might just hold them together, to think, well, it's either this or a Conservative government, and it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, again, it's the question of, do we go back to another Conservative government? Is that something these parties want? Is that something these parties are comfortable letting happen? That whole mess is going to be, their decision.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be a tricky one. I think this Parliament is going to be interesting, and I think maybe it's something we need, actually. Maybe we need this interesting bit. Maybe it'll revitalise politics a little bit, because we are a little bit dry. Last term was quite dry, besides the case with Josh Miller. I think if we didn't have that, it wasn't going to be much, was it? But this time we see some new policies, and some new policies in each party as well.
Indeed,
So we might actually see
indeed.
a collective of just quite a lot of change.
Indeed, it's going to be a whirlwind, and I think I'm getting the sense that we won't know for a few days what the results are, which is, of course, the opposite of what we want on this show. But I think it might be worth, getting the show to go for a minute. We're gonna be going in a moment because it's gonna go for a while to see what the results are. So I'll take final comments from Torm and from Phantom, and then I'll give my own final comments. Torm, you can go first. Are we there, Torm?
He's left.
Oh, right. God bless him.
He's,
He's probably got something to do. So, Phantom,
he's probably
you
crying.
go last comments, then I'll go last comments.
Last comments, again, absolutely slamming this point at home. If there is any coalition talks going on right now that involve more than two parties, for the love of God, please make sure that you structure out everything.
Yes.
Otherwise,
Fully
it's not going to
structure.
work.
Yes. Like what you did in government. You had a fucking Trello out there and you nailed down what you're going to do week by week. They need to do that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And then for me, I say the same thing. And I want to just say that don't force us to an election. The literal Democrats, you in particular, you're a party that might influence the next parliament a lot. Don't meme. This is important. Multiple elections with multiple parties causes enough instability to maybe increase parliamentary activity, but it also can hurt parliamentary activity. We all need to take a moment now to readjust. You are all now MPs. You're not candidates. You're MPs. Focus and govern.
Yeah.
So
100%.
I want to thank everyone for coming and watching tonight. Oh, sorry about that. This has been this is my favorite stream, and this is our 5th stream. I did not expect election night to last this long and to be as capable and competent and exciting as it was. I want to thank you all. I want to thank Nova Productions, Channel 5. I want to thank the main stage. I want to thank the main panel. I want to thank the crew, everyone. And I want to thank the viewers who participated. We trended on Twitter for some awful reason. Thank you. God bless. God save the king. May God bless your souls. Election night thanks you. And we'll be back either in 2 weeks or 2 months to help you with the next results. Godspeed. Good evening.